I apologize for the sunglasses, but you get to a certain age, sadly, and you need the help. I'm Owen Tabor, MUS class of 85, and on behalf of the board, I want to thank everybody who made this happen, but particularly 4 people. First, obviously, Coach Jake Rudolph, who gave his soul to this school and the football program for many years, and without him, none of this would be here, and none of us would be here, and that's why we're here today. I also want to take a minute to thank Parker Phillips, who's going to be talking in a minute. This was an idea that germinated in his huge brain a few years ago, and we were conversing back and forth about Coach Rudolph and what he'd meant to us and what he meant to the school and the program, and trying to find some way to celebrate all the things that he did. And he and Mr. Hagewood had some communications, and Clay Smythe and Andy McCarroll, and this was really driven by Parker. Even though he's been living in New York for the last 20 years or so, he had a passion for this and felt like Coach Rudolph ought to be honored and remembered like the greats at MUS have been in the past. And so I really appreciate the work he put into it, and honestly, this would not be happening if it weren't for him. I want to thank Mr. Hagewood, without whom nothing at this school happens. He's primarily responsible for making MUS the great institution that it is today. As everybody knows, he's been teaching here forever. He taught me English, became the headmaster about 20 years ago, and has led the school to be an even greater place than it was when I went here. I have a son who graduated from here, another son who's about to graduate from here, and it has been a fantastic place from A to Z, and his leadership has just been nothing short of fantastic, and we're really going to miss him. And lastly, I want to thank Carolyn Rudolph. She taught me Spanish, all the Spanish that I'll ever know. She's seated up here in the front. And I think a lot of times people forget about what a brutal job the wife of a high school coach is. He has to spend a lot of time away from home, a lot of time with knuckleheads like me and Parker and Andy McCarroll and guys like that. And it's got to be very stressful, but she was always there every game. And she was the heart and soul of the program just as much as Jake was. And I'm thrilled that you can be here with your sons to enjoy this. This project is possible. Thanks. This project is possible because of the men who grew up to value the lessons they learned in the dirt and the sweat and the tears that they accumulated while wearing the red and blue for MUS. Coach Rudolph was a lot of things. He was tough, he was scrappy, he was demanding, he was encouraging, he was conservative, he was innovative. Most of all, he was classy. The lessons that I remember from playing in MUS weren't as much the wins and losses. It was how to play the game and how to play it with class. He didn't tolerate showmanship. He didn't tolerate prima donnas. You listened to and respected your coaches. You didn't taunt or belittle your opponent. You didn't give up when things weren't going your way. You won with class and you lost with class. He taught solid fundamentals. He won games not because he had superior talent. He had me starting. He did not have superior talent, but because his players blocked, tackled, and executed with precision. Usually raising money is difficult. This was not difficult. When the men that we talked to look back on their youth and acknowledge who made them the people they are today, they thought about Jake Rudolph. And when we called people, they immediately responded. Sports coaches have a tremendous influence on young men, often more so than their own fathers. Jake Rudolph wasn't a perfect man. None of us are, but he was a hell of a football coach, a hell of a man, and his players loved him for it. Donations came from nearly 300 former players. Some were all-stars, some were bench warmers. I want to thank all the guys who contributed, but several guys who really dug deep. And if you see them, pat them on the back because they made this happen. Obviously, Fred Smith, class of 62, was a huge donor. Buck Donovan, class of 90. Parker Phillips, 85. John Dobbs, 85. Tro Gillespie, class of 65. Chip Grayson, class of 78. Andy McCarroll, class of 86. Welford Tabor, class of 86. Kent Wunderlich, 66. And Clay Smythe, class of 85, were all major donors, and there were, as I said, up to 300 players contributed to this from the 60s to the 90s. We had guys who'd never even met Coach Rudolph that donated to this because they knew what he meant to the program. I'd like to introduce Parker Phillips, number 83, my classmate and tight end and defensive end for the 85 Owls. As I said, he brought up the idea for a memorial, pushed the issue, and without him, this would not have happened. Thanks.
Thanks, Owen. As he said, I'm Parker Phillips, class of '85. And Owen kind of did all the thank yous that I can think of, and I would reiterate what he said, but I want to thank everyone also who participated in this project, including all those former players who saw fit to honor Coach Rudolph in this permanent way. But I do want to offer a special thanks to Mr. Hagewood, Clay Smythe, Andy McCarroll, and Owen, all of whom embraced this concept from the beginning and offered essential support and brainpower throughout the process. I'm not really qualified to be speaking at this event. I played on some good teams in the pre-internet era, but I wasn't a great football player, nor did I have a particularly close relationship with Coach Rudolph. In fact, my first direct experience with him was early in my sophomore campaign, when I was reassigned from quarterback to third-string punt snapper behind Jim Burnett and Rich Williamson. Nevertheless, playing football at MUS for Coach Jake Rudolph was a big deal in my life then, and in many ways remains so. Rare is the week that I don't recall some perceived triumph or disappointment from those years and contemplate for a moment what it all meant or didn't. Jake was obviously a great football coach. He won an amazing 275 games, a state championship along with a couple of near misses, and countless divisional titles. In my opinion, these accomplishments and his 39 years of service to MUS by themselves merit the sort of memorialization we are celebrating today. But the wins and the years are just part of why I felt inspired to be involved in this project. What I remember with the greatest pride and affection is the way Coach Rudolph represented MUS to the outside world. In all the years I played for him, and for the many, many more years I've followed the program, I never saw Coach Rudolph publicly bemoan officials or demonstrate anything other than the utmost respect for all opponents, win or lose. He didn't run up scores, and nothing got him more fired up than his own players' unsportsmanlike behavior on or off the field. For a lot of reasons, most of which can be summed up with the word privilege, MUS has always been an easy and obvious target for those inclined to attack. Despite all that, MUS football has an established reputation for competing with class and humility, and the reason for that is Coach Rudolph. The reason for that reputation is Coach Rudolph, not only for how he personally represented the school, but also for how his teams won and lost. I would emphasize that outside the public eye, around his teams, Coach Rudolph was equally exemplary. He asked for your best effort, but he never humiliated players. He honored us, maybe too generously, with his famous two-word code of behavior, do right. Expletives very rarely flew from his or any of his coaches' lips, and when they so infrequently did, almost always during games, it was more often in response to player behavior than it was to player performance. A quick example that culminates in my all-time favorite sideline quote by any coach. My sophomore year, we started a defensive tackle named Preston Rogers, who would acquire the nickname Dogman, presumably for his heedless determination, but maybe also for his size. At about 5'8", 150 pounds, Dogman has to be one of the smallest defensive tackles ever to play anywhere. And he played very well, although sometimes arguably with an excess of enthusiasm. It was during one such over-enthusiastic moment, during an actual game, that I saw Jake fling his clipboard, turn to Coach Austin, and yell, "Bobby, Dogman's going ape out there." Coach Rudolph achieved success with, and Owen's already said this, no offense to anyone, mostly inferior talent, and he did so using unconventional methods, which, among other things, is kind of cool. When I played, and probably still today, the standard pregame ritual for most teams was to whoop and holler and generally carry on in such a manner as to menace the opponent and whip one's own troops into a ferocious lather. MUS, on the other hand, conducted its pregame drills in virtual silence, because Jake considered all the whooping and hollering to be a waste of energy. We were expected to act like we'd been there before, whether we had or hadn't, and it worked. MUS was always, somewhat mysteriously, frankly, strong in the fourth quarter. All these years later, this practice of letting one's actions speak for themselves, minus the energy and dignity-sapping rituals of bragging and browbeating, seems quaint, maybe even strange and unfamiliar, but maybe not to those of us gathered here today to honor this fine man. Thanks again to all of you, and thanks, Coach Rudolph.
Thank you, Owen, and thank you, Parker. You said it well. I think all of our students and everyone associated with Memphis University School today enjoys the traditions, the reputation, the heritage that men like Coach Rudolph built. Men like Coach Rudolph, whom present and future students will never know personally, must be remembered because we are ever in their debt. We remember because gratitude for what they did is one small way that we make a payment on that debt. But we remember them also because their lives inspire us. As Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote in A Psalm of Life, lives of great men remind us we can make our lives sublime, and in parting, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. I add my thanks to all those who contributed to this Jake Rudolph Plaza, for the work of our steering committee, for Owen's leadership especially, and also for the work behind the scenes of our Director of Advancement, Perry DeMint, and his wonderful staff who shepherded this project with the same adroit skill and patient care that he gives to all his outstanding work here at MUS. The project to honor Coach Rudolph raised $580,000. The names of those who gave are listed in your program. Their names are also chiseled into the limestone steps that rise to this statue. Jake Rudolph grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, and after graduation from high school, he spent a postgraduate year at the Darlington School in Rome, Georgia. From there, he went on to Georgia Tech. He would start at defensive back on Tech's undefeated 1951 and 1952 Orange and Sugar Bowl teams. Little Jakey Rudolph, as all Tech fans called him, is still legendary in the minds and hearts of Yellow Jacket fans for one play, his fourth down goal line tackle on the great Alabama running back Bobby Marlowe. Celebrated author Roy Blunt Jr. reminisced in Sports Illustrated, quote, "I was at Grant Field the day little Jakey Rudolph tackled Alabama running back Bobby Marlowe about instep high to save a Tech victory. 1 second, Marlowe was soaring, outlined against the sky, and the next second, as it seemed to me, Jakey had snatched him from the horizon by the feet. The tackle would knock Jake unconscious. But it preserved a 7-3 win, a trip to the Sugar Bowl, and a $125,000 payout to the school. Thus, the stop became known as the $125,000 tackle, an amount that in today's dollars would be over $1 million. By the way, Georgia Tech beat Ole Miss in New Orleans to claim the mythical national championship, and Jake made the Collier's Magazine All-American team. After graduation from college, Jake was a player coach for 2 years with an Air Force team in Germany that won the European Air Force Championship. He would return to Darlington to coach football. After a year at Darlington, Colonel Ross Lynn recruited Jake to build a football program here at MUS. So in 1959, he followed Gene Thorne as head coach and athletic director, and during the next 39 years, Coach Rudolph's teams won 295 games, a host of district, regional, state runners-up titles, and one very memorable state AA championship in 1985. He was honored over the years with numerous awards. They're listed in your program, some during his lifetime, many posthumously. Alumni who played under his tutelage, as you have heard, inculcated the values he taught through the game of football: courage, perseverance, teamwork, discipline, consistency, excellence, individual responsibility, and many are here today. Some now in their 70s. Players here in this audience that span 4 decades. The voice of the old coach is never stilled. One former player wrote, quote, "We always played against schools in the old days that had a size advantage. He was able to draw something extra out of his players. He had the heart of a lion and the temperament of a bulldog. It is something I learned from him. I never wanted to let him down. He was a great coach, person, and teacher. People like Coach Rudolph give meaning to the word class." Now, other alumni remembered his Elvis impersonation, the painstakingly intimate way he watered the manicured Bermuda turf at Hull Dobbs Athletic Field, the cigarettes, the clipboard, summer day camp, the two-a-days at Horseshoe Lake, the Darrell Royal Wishbone film, the mantras they heard repeatedly from him: play all phases of the kicking game, stay in your lanes, backs cover up and hold on to the football, and after the kickoff, men, it's just another football game. Over the years, he has become an MUS icon like Colonel Lynn, like Gene Thorne, legendary now in the hearts of the thousands of MUS alumni who played for him or who cheered the red and blue on to victory here at Hull Dobbs Athletic Field. Jake Rudolph made an incalculable contribution to the moral development of generations of MUS men, and thus he has had a profound influence on many great leaders in this city of Memphis and elsewhere. All of us who knew him held him in very high esteem. And all of us hold his wife, Carolyn Rudolph, in that same high esteem as well. I'm thrilled that Carolyn is here today with family. She was a teacher at Presbyterian Day School for many years. Carolyn influenced the lives of hundreds of boys, most of whom would go on to graduate from MUS, many of whom would play football for Coach Rudolph here. Jake could not have accomplished what he did without her. They lived together on this campus right over here for almost 4 decades. Reared 3 fine sons, Steve, Courtnay, and David, all of whom had the privilege of playing for their dad. Carolyn's hospitality, devotion, friendliness permeated the campus, and her steady presence and firm hand provided constant support. And so, the Jake Rudolph Plaza is now a reality, designed by Page Duke Landscape Architects, Principal Landscape Architect Ben Page, Senior Landscape Architect Ed Tesher. They were assisted greatly, often led actually, by our own Rusty Bloodworth, class of 1963. Grinder, Tabor, and Grinder performed the construction, and our thanks go to Brenda and Fred Grinder, Justin Grinder, class of 97, and especially to our trustee, Brett Grinder, class of 91. Jonathan Hastings was project manager, William Smitty Smith, superintendents. Now, the names of the donors were cut into this limestone by Christie Cut Stone Nathan Craft. The black granite slab on which the statue rests came from China by container ship, and then from California by FedEx with a timely assist from Fred Smith. Representing the school at the site every day, making sure all was done perfectly, was our indispensable Director of Facilities and Safety, Willie Hollinger. Internationally acclaimed artist Zenos Frudakis from Philadelphia sculpted our statue of Coach Rudolph. And we thank Mrs. Elizabeth Francis and Portraits Incorporated for representing Mr. Frudakis and introducing us to him for this commission. Frudakis has more than 100 bronze sculptures in public and private collections throughout the country, including, to name just a few, the United States Air Force Memorial Honor Guard in Arlington National Cemetery, statues and busts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Frederick Law Olmsted, Philadelphia Mayor Frank Rizzo, Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, General Dwight Eisenhower, Sir Winston Churchill, Payne Stewart, Jack Nicklaus, and now Jake Rudolph. David, would you assist me? And let's take a look at what Mr. Frudakis has done. I think it appropriate in honor of Coach Rudolph that we, all alumni, join together with 15 quick and snappy rahs. You know them. 1, 2, 1, 2, rah, 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 team, team, team.
I'm David Rudolph, class of 1981, the youngest son of Coach Jake Rudolph. I'm here today with a lot of Rudolphs. My mother, Carolyn Rudolph, here in the front row. My brother, Courtnay Rudolph, class of 1977. Steve's in the front row, class of 1974. We've got our wives and children and extended family, as well as our cousins Goodman and Mason Rudolph, who are seniors here at MUS. On behalf of the entire Rudolph family, I want to say how grateful we are for this, everyone who made this statue and this plaza possible. This was just a huge effort by a lot of people, and we're so grateful. We are so proud that you've chosen to honor Coach Jake in this way. This is a wonderful statue. It's a true work of art. Even though he never met my father, Zenos Frudakis absolutely captured the essence of Coach Jake Rudolph in this statue. Our family loves what he's done here. I know he could not be here today, but thank you, Zenos, so much for your hard work and your God-given creative talents and artistic skills. Now, when I look at this statue, the first thing I want to do, I want to give him a hug. I want to tell him how much I love him and how much I miss him. And the second thing I want to do is I want to say, Dad, I'm an old quarterback. Dad, what's the play? For you old-timers who played for Jake, you know what the play is. He'd say, David, Y left, trap 10. Trap 10 was a running play, pulling linemen. It's got a lot of misdirection, but that was his favorite play because it always worked. And the other team knew that Jake was going to call trap 10, and they still couldn't stop it. So that's when I look at him, he's telling me trap 10. This plaza is a fitting location to honor my dad. He loved Hull Dobbs Athletic Field. My family lived in the faculty home just through the woods there. This field was literally in our backyard. We grew up here. And when my father started in 1959, there was not a lot to this field. It was kind of like the baseball field in the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Ridgeway Road was a dirt road. There really wasn't a lot to this. It was just raw farmland and with some small stands. Through the years, my dad built the football program here, and this stadium was built up with it. It was sacred ground for him. He planted the grass, he mowed it, he watered it, he kept pesky trespassers from playing touch football and hitting golf balls on it. But he did build a golf course around this stadium with a green that was where the current players come in before a game. There was a green there. And he won a lot of big football games on this field. I want to talk a little bit about the clipboard you see here. My father was known for his clipboard. Now, this was at a time before the laminated play sheets and as well as the computer printouts coaches use now. But he would use his clipboard and he would put his game plans and his written strategy inside a clipboard. Now, Coach Jake, as you've heard from Parker, could be pretty competitive, and he was known on occasion to be a little tough on his clipboard. And this was in the days of film as opposed to video, so occasionally Jake would let his clipboard release and become airborne, or he would slam the clipboard hard on something or someone. But at film sessions, we would love to play it back and see what happened to Jake's clipboard on a particularly bad play by an owl. But when this whole process started with the statue, Zenas Verdakis asked my brothers and I, did we have anything that my father used or wore when he coached? My father's last season was in 1997. He died in 2008. So we were not sure we had anything left from his coaching days. My brothers had some old MUS coaching jackets, similar to the one you see here that he always wore. With Coach Austin's help, we found some old Rydell coaching shoes like they wore in the day, and you see those there. But we really couldn't find much else. My brother Steve went up to his attic, started looking through some boxes, and found a lot of my father's belongings, and he came up and found an actual clipboard. I got it up here with me today. This is one of the clipboards he used, and it was his last clipboard he used in his final season. And when my brother found this was full of all kinds of memorabilia and notes from his last season. He had photos, he had inspirational poems, he had all kinds of things that meant a lot to him as a coach. He also had notes of his last speech that he made to the parents that last season, where he was basically summing up his whole career. It was his swan song. Well, when we saw this, it was kind of like a time capsule. We think Coach Jake is speaking to us here, that he wanted to say something. He wanted us to find this clipboard. So I'm going to read a little bit from his last speech to the parents, because I think if he was here today, this is what he would say. First, he would have thanked everybody here for what they did for this plaza, for this wonderful statue, with heartfelt gratitude. And second, he would have thanked his old coach, Colonel Ross Lynn, for making him the head football coach and giving him the opportunity of his lifetime to be here at MUS. But I had some notes that we found inside this clipboard. My dad said, "Yes, I have memories. A coaching career of 40 years to look back on, the ups and downs, the hills and valleys, but so much fun like all of life. It gives me particular pride to see kids grow and mature into men, to see an athletic program expand and develop. It gives me the greatest pleasure to be a part, however small, of it all." He then said, "I'm surrounded by the best professionals. To my headmasters, faculty, all coaches, my family, my one greatest fan, my wife, Carolyn, and for every person who has contributed to this football program, thank you." And then he closed his speech to the parents. He said, "For all that's been said this evening and for all that's been done, you have my deep thanks. And for all you have been, are tonight, and will be tomorrow, you have my love. It's been a great ride." I do think that's what he would have said. Now, you note my father mentioned his one greatest fan, his wife, Carolyn Rudolph. Let me tell you, he meant it. She was his one greatest fan, and she's sitting right here in the front row. There would not be a Hall of Fame football coach, Jake Rudolph, without my mother, Carolyn Rudolph. You were here 39 years, every Friday night, rain or shine. You were at every away game. Being a coach's wife is not always peaches and cream, particularly if the Owls lost a toughie. My brothers and I are so pleased that our mother is mentioned and honored in the plaque that you will read behind the statue. Mom, I want to thank you for being there for Dad all along the way. Your unwavering support and love for Jake throughout his coaching career was just incredible. All right, now I got to get a little personal. I better address these words directly to the statue. Dad, it was a great ride. Playing quarterback for you was one of the great highlights of my life. I wore the number 13 because that was the number you wore when you were an All-American at Georgia Tech. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about you and the influence you had on me and my brothers and so many other players, many of whom are here today. It's 35 years later, Dad, but it's a reunion year for me, and I'm certainly a lot slower than I used to be. But I see your statue here, and I just want to put on my blue MUS jersey, run on that field, and play for you again, Dad. Thank you. This is a proud day for the Rudolph family. Thank you again to all the MUS family for this wonderful event. Thank you so much.
That concludes our program. You're welcome to come up and get a close personal look at the statue.